Good evening and welcome to P&P Live. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of Politics and Prose, along with my wife, Alyssa Muscatine. And thanks for joining us here online, where we've been able to move many of our events in response to the current pandemic and continued need for social distancing. With Crowdcast, which is the platform we're using this evening, you can see us, but we can't see you. And you can still ask a question. To do so, just click on the Ask a Question icon at the bottom of your screens. And there, you'll also see a green button to purchase this evening's featured book, Nothing is Wrong Here, and Here is Why, by Alexandra Petri. It's a real pleasure to be hosting Alex, who's a Washington Post columnist with a great comic sense, and who delivers, as her post bio says, a lighter take on the news and opinions of the day. She's also written a play and a comic book, appeared on Jeopardy, and several years ago put together a book of essays, A Field Guide to Awkward Silences. Her new book is another collection of essays, some new and some repurposed from her post column. Now, lest some of you think the crisis-ridden times in which we live are better suited for crying and raging than smiling and outright laughing, Alex's writings consistently show how dry wit and sarcasm and political parody can be used effectively to expose, skewer, and debunk much of the racism, idiocy, incompetence, and absurdity around us. Last summer, Alex kindly moderated a discussion with Emily Nussbaum, who spoke at P&P about her collection of essays, I Like to Watch. Emily, of course, is a Pulitzer-winning TV critic for The New Yorker. She was for 9 years before going on leave this year to write another book. She's here this evening to turn the tables on Alex and moderate this discussion. So Alex and Emily, the screen is yours.
Hello. Hi. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I like the idea that I'm about to turn the tables on you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to hold your feet to the fire. This is Alexandra's wonderful book. And, you know, I know he was talking about it being funny, but I was thinking while I was rereading it, that the thing where people say, you know, it made me laugh, but it made me cry. And they go, it made me laugh, but it made me think. This is literally true. Like, I started crying while reading the book. And it's a book of hilarious, uproarious comedy pieces, like, that are this unique combination of, you look horrified, Alexandra. I mean, obviously, this is a very painful time for the country in general, but it's a very cathartic book beyond being funny. You know, she's a comedy writer, but I actually think of her as the person who works at the Washington Post and within a day manages to produce columns that do the two crucial things. They make sense of situations that are completely surreal and enraging. And even better, they make the reader, I call them the viewer for your columns. They make the reader feel less crazy. And this is definitely a book about a crazy making time. It runs from 2016, I believe, until now. And it works as kind of a warped diary of the period. And I have to say, I found it particularly good at capturing how time itself feels broken, as though everything is happening at once, too fast and too slow. It's full of fairy tales and science fiction references, which is maybe the only way to talk about politics right now. And I will say there are a lot of columns in this book that I love, but my favorite one begins with the words, Scott Pruitt must have his moisturizing lotion. But that was actually only my favorite one today, and I would pick a different one on a different occasion. And honestly, for me, the one that spoke most to me during this particularly terrible week was a different piece, and is from several years ago, although the final line in it seems pretty eternal. If there were an occasion, I would be rising to it, but I am not rising. It's just a dark piece about feelings of, you know, rage and political paralysis and a hope for things to change. So I want to welcome Alexandra. I know that was a relatively serious introduction for what is a funny book, but, you know, I have found you an incredible, like, creator of tools to get through this painful time. Welcome, Alexandra.
Oh, thank you. That was lovely. I want to frame that somehow, and I don't know how that's physically possible given that they were spoken words.
It's really a beautiful book, and actually it was weird because something can be simultaneously a distraction and go right to the heart of things, that's what this felt like. And I know this is an extremely weird time to launch a book. We were talking about what's going on there, what's going on here. I'm in Brooklyn, you're in Washington. For starters, I actually wanted to ask about a specific thing that's not about the comedy of the book, but about the seriousness of the book. And there's a great line up front where you say that there are only 35 sentences in this book that are sincere. Is that right? Did you literally count the sentences?
I think it was more of a ballpark estimate. I'm trying to remember what I thought the sentences were.
Yeah, I was going to ask, what were the sentences in this book that are sincere? You're not sure?
Because I think the framing of it was this sort of heightened voice where I was trying to make the case, what would you sound like if you thought that things were going well right now? And that was sort of the framing of it. But within each piece, because since a lot of them were written for the Post, and so they had to survive online, where you're just reading this one thing and you're not reading it in a broader framework where it's, yes, I have to read this with my satire hat on. Usually in the course of each piece, there'll be a sort of a turn or a sentence where I try to pop out of the screen and say, no, not this, this is bad. But hopefully in more coherent and, erudite language than that. But sometimes just as simply as that. And so I think those are probably the sentences to which I was alluding.
Yeah. It's framed as a very positive thing. The title of the book is "Nothing is Wrong and Here Is Why." Was that always the title, or did you consider other titles for it?
I think I considered some others. I love a big unwieldy title that's sort of like one of those James Joyce words for an object falling down a flight of stairs. To me, I like a good sort of, Robert Benchley had all these books that were Around the World in 280 Days, or Under the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, or David Copperfield, and that's just one book. And you're like, this is, I don't know what's in here, but it sure sounds like there's stuff. And
it sounds like there's stuff. There's one of the books, there's an asterisk that explains that it got included in the White House briefing. Could you tell me a little bit about how that happened and which piece? That was the piece about the budget, right?
Yes, it was the one that was called Donald Trump's budget is perfect and will fix everything that's wrong with America. And the second line was it will punch an eagle in the face, and also it will force people to pull themselves up by their invisible bootstraps. It was relatively clear from the second sentence, I thought, that it was not to be taken as a serious post-endorsement of the Trump budget, because it was the only thing bigger than its budget idiocy is its lack of compassion and stuff like that. So I'm are they endorsing this attitude towards the budget?
How did you find out that it? How did you find out that it got included?
I found out because I don't subscribe. I used to not subscribe to the Daily 1600, where you get the things that President Trump thinks is going on, and President Trump must read. And now I get it, because I'm what if I'm real news again? But also I'm curious to know what he thinks is going on, because it's always a very different version of what actually to me seems to be going on in the country, and things are much nicer there, but also scarier, and just who's at fault for things seems very different. And how great Donald Trump is much bigger. And so it's been neat to subscribe to this, but since I did not subscribe, it was fun hearing from people being did you know that you were on the president's email thing? And I'm well, now I've learned two things. I've learned that I was in there, and I've learned that you're a subscriber. That's pretty cool. But so now I subscribe.
I see. So somebody I figured somebody called you up and said, you should know that President Trump read this as actual news about the response to his budget.
Yeah, or at any rate, one of the many, the best people who surround him, one of the best people clearly got hands on it and said, this must be disseminated far and wide.
Yes, well, that's good. At least your work got spread around, more people got to read it. Yeah. It was really fascinating while reading the book, because I was thinking, it's a strange situation where in an odd way you are writing about a set of characters who are public figures. And there's a weird quality to several, especially the early pieces about Trump, where they're not empathetic to Trump in the sense of caring about him, but they're actually this comedic attempt to gauge what is going on inside him. And I wonder how much that is a conscious thing, because there's a piece in which he's talking to his sons because he's not allowed to talk about business. So he's forced to have personal conversations. And there's another one that's about the inauguration. And I wondered like whether you were thinking about him as a character and that kind of aspect of your job.
I think it's interesting because public figures, it used to be like all my friends who would be in LA, I'd be like, oh my God, did you see Brad Pitt? Was he in your penumbra? Like, give me all of your local celebrity impressions. And now they're like, oh my God, you're in DC. Like, have you seen, like, you know, what's AOC up to? Have you seen Dr. Fauci? Like, what's going on? Like, suddenly, like, the set of characters that everyone's like, these are celebrities who have, like, narratives and tales. And, like, they would do this, but they wouldn't do that. Like, I feel like it almost goes back to, I mean, as long as we've had politics, there have been, like, these sort of cardboard versions of the people who are in positions of power that we use to tell stories about why they're doing what they're doing. And like, I'm sure they're back with like Washington and whatnot, but with Trump, he's been creating this cardboard version of himself for as long as he's been in public life. So he's as much a person, like he's not like, you know, when you're Ted Cruz, you sort of show up and you're like, I wonder how people will see me. And everyone's like, this man did the Zodiac killings. That's what we've concluded. He did the Zodiac killings and he loves soup. And we can work with this. We can build around it. And Trump like has only existed insofar as he's been able to give people this idea, this like sort of fairy tale, fantasy, reality TV character version of himself. So he weirdly has a leg up on any story you might try to tell about him in your conventional, like when Tim Kaine was like, oh, Tim Kaine will make you a casserole and he'll come on your camping trip. And, you know, just when you try to figure out, like, how do I make sense of this person? What person have I seen like this? Because you want to try to feel like you understand the people who are in charge of things in your country. And so, like, one of the things you do is you try to tell yourself a story about them where you're like, well, Al Gore would do this, but not that. And Donald Trump, it's just like he's been in control of that story for so long. So I was like, how do you even start doing something that's not just him, but more? So I was trying to figure out, like, because to me, it just seems very lonely to always live in that version of yourself. But I also am myself, and I have different responses to things in the world than he clearly does.
It's true. I mean, he clearly presents himself oddly as a fictional character in this odd way. Like he has this weird relationship to it. But
like, you know, I never thought about insulin. Maybe I should do it. Like Sarah Cooper has these wonderful parodies because, like, I think that's one of the best ways of like making fun of him is to be like, take him out of the words and just like observe the words and like put someone else in there and be like, what is going on? Like, yeah.
Yeah, Sarah Cooper, I don't know if you guys have seen Sarah Cooper's lip syncs online of him, but they're amazing. And it really is, you know, it's that weird thing where you try to analyze comedy and you're like, why does this work so well? Like, why does certain things work? Because the whole thing with Trump has been the difficulty of like, how do you satirize something that's insane and disgusting and already sort of surreal and comedic, and these different kinds of techniques for doing it. And it is weird because she sort of takes the words out of context and puts them in her body and they come out in a different way. I don't know if you're conscious of yourself as having like techniques for doing it. Like, do you have, because you know, when you write so many columns, I feel like, I mean, at least when I was writing a column, there's certain kind of go-to structures. Like, how do you do it? How do you do it? You have to write so quickly in response to things.
Well, a lot of it, sometimes the actual process of writing can take a very long time, or it can take almost no time at all. And but the process of coming up with a column is a lot of you stare at the wall, you walk around. It used to be maybe at the outdoors, but now it's, you know, I walk around the kitchen. I, you know, open the oven. I put some quiche in there, which I purchased at an outside source. I'm not one of the people you'll see on your feed making a sourdough. I feel like the sourdough is alive. Nothing will convince me that like it's eating stuff. You have to feed it. Like what? I don't know. I get confused about its origins. And also there's a lot of sort of staring at the wall and doing other things that don't seem like work. And then just waiting for it to sort of like the mouse of the idea to run through the cheese maze of your mind and come out hopefully at the end with something successful. And a lot of it too is I try to not do the same column every day. So if you do a lot of, oh my gosh, this is bad. So you can do like a list, like there's different formats. So sometimes I'll have a format before I'll have an idea, and then you'll see what's going on. You'll think, oh, I'm really mad about this, and this would go well in this way. So
what are the different formats?
Like you could do like a list. You can do something where you're agreeing with the thing in a way that tries to illustrate why it's bad. You could do something in all caps. I think all caps is a genre. Lindy West pioneered that genre, but it continues.
Your Brett Kavanaugh all caps column is definitely a classic. Like,
because he was in all caps, and nobody
was in all caps. Yeah.
People, like whenever you quote Trump, somebody was saying this, like whenever you quote him, you sort of wind up flattening him and it sounds like, oh, it's something that the president said. And like the New York Times headline today was like, the president calls for calm. And it's like, that is exactly not what he was calling for. He was like, let's bring in more troops and I'll decide when there's enough troops. And that's the opposite of calm. That's the opposite of what anyone wants. That's not why people are in the streets demanding. So just trying to put him in your usual format, I feel like you often wind up with this semi-logical thing where you can sort of have your dinner and say, oh, the president spoke. And he never speaks. He does other verbs, but he doesn't speak.
There's a list piece in there where you list all the members of his cabinet in these different forms. I was wondering, I was going to read, let me see if I can find it, because I wanted to read one of the list things. Well, one of them, I think it opens with, let me find it, where you said, I thought I had the best team ever to be assembled, but I had a big coat full of skunks, 6 rejected concepts for Batman villains, and a disembodied voice that yells rude things in the quiet car. And you went on from that, and the entire thing is this deranged list. This is a weirdly picking question, but did you actually match the people to the things in the list?
Where I'm like, I think we know who this is, but I don't know. I was just reading Rousseau's Confessions because I love when somebody, like my favorite genre of story is when somebody tells you a story and they think they're the hero and you can tell by the end of the story that they are actually the villain. Where he's one of those guys where he's like, all of my exes are crazy and all of my friends turned against me. And it's like, what are the odds that this would be? Like, he's like, I don't have time to tell you, but David Hume ruined my life. And I'm like, well, I'd love to know how. But anyway, people back in the day, they kept writing sort of satires and pamphlets and characters, and people would be like, I'm pretty sure that Abbott was based on me. And you'd have to quickly be like, no, it's my other friend. And I can see how you would think that because you wear similar outfits, but actually it's this guy I worked with. So, but the neat thing about the Trump folks is that they contain multitudes. They're like that Walt Whitman thing where it's like, they contradict themselves. They contain multitudes.
Yeah.
Both the Batman villains and the raccoons in a coat, and even more, truly the best. But I just love like a good, just the structure, like something happened, but then instead we got something different. Just something different is always funny to me.
Has it gotten harder to write about this over time? I'm curious whether you felt like it's more cathartic and freewheeling just because there's been this very warped and confusing span of time as things have sort of ridden through. I was curious whether like there are subjects it's harder to write about.
I think Trump has become harder to write about just because everyone's writing about him. He's like the sort of black hole into which all of like time warps around him and your ship is bending in a weird shape and just everyone's pouring all of this energy and all of this thought. And so you can describe him in a way that like is a perfect description. And then like in 3 months or one day, it'll be it'll be all played out. And so try to figure out a fresh way of describing an ongoing sort of almost, routine horror is an oxymoron, but like he is like that. And there's other things that sort of around him where it's like, how do you keep trying to make this a surprise when you expect something that's so awful that if you go to a restaurant and instead of getting a sandwich, you get just like a giant piece of shit, like the first day, you're going to be like, oh my God, I got a horrible piece of, this is no good. And then you go back the second day and like, you kind of like now the possibilities entered your mind, but you still should be equally upset that you're getting like a pile of shit instead of your sandwich that you ordered. Like by day 7, you're just like, how do I even describe this, which I guess is now routine. So I don't know.
I know first of all, you have the greatest Wikipedia page because you've done a bunch of different things. Like, and I read this interview with you in Cosmopolitan, actually, that I highly recommend because I thought it was delightful, from a few years ago, where you were talking about how you got to your job. But you, among other things, I know, aside from you're a playwright as well. And I know you used to do stand-up comedy and you don't do it anymore. Is that right? Or
right, yeah, I mostly sit down and type comedy.
You like to type comedy. I'm curious what the experience was like doing stand-up, whether you miss it, whether you hated it. What kind of stand-up were you?
Well,
and did you ever super bomb the way that people?
Oh yeah, oh for sure. Like the very first time, I started doing it in high school because I saw Last Comic Standing, and I had this entire routine that was based on the punchline was the word matriculate, and it was about George W. Bush and how he was doing he banned matriculation because he thought it sounded naughty, and it did. It was also on top of that, it was performed at a coffee shop because I was 18, and my parents were there's a place where you can drink but you don't have to, and you should go do it there. And so I did it at this coffee shop, so everyone there is completely sober, and my joke's punchline is matriculation, so it didn't go super well, but I kept doing it for several years after that.
Did you do both stand-up and improv, or did you just do
improv? Yeah, but yeah, yes, and yeah, now you can see that I did it. And I love to sit in an audience and yell out suggestions of non-geographic locations. That's always been one of my passions. So I enjoyed seeing improv, but I also just really like writing, and I feel like jokes that I have time to think about, I enjoy more than jokes that I'm just I hope my brain has something good. Go brain, go for it. So that was why I preferred writing to improv. And when it comes to stand-up, in order to get good at it, you have to say the same things over and over again a lot of times. And I'm just I love getting to say something new every day. I prefer that. So I'd have to really be this is a grand joke to get to want to do it enough times to make it good as a true stand-up ought to. So I continue to respect and enjoy it, but I'm happy not doing it. Although I miss people. But that's just sort of a broad stance.
Well, I think it's a broader thing that people are feeling right now. It's incredibly strange doing all social things online in this way. You also won a whistling contest, I believe. And
I did not win a whistling contest. I won a punning contest. I placed in the whistling contest because, in the sense that anyone who showed up placed, and that was a lot of fun because, every strange community, people who like to pun, I feel like you have sort of as a baseline slightly more in common than people who like to whistle, where it's just oh, my mouth can do this really cool thing and I can produce beautiful sounds. But yeah, go to the whistling competition, which I believe, I don't know what its status is this year. I haven't stayed as in touch with them as I stayed in touch with the pun community, which is still.
It was is there a whistling community?
Yeah, no. People love to whistle, and you've got sort of endurance whistling. You've got people who do whistling with an aid that you can, if you have a hand, or there's a category for that. You can whistle while doing something else. There were people whistling while folding origami. It was truly something to behold. Highly would recommend it.
Okay, can I just ask, what did you do? Did you just do pure sort of dogma whistling, or did you juggle, or?
I did classical and popular whistling, and I also signed up for this thing where it said that if you wanted to, whistlers, would you like to perform at area churches? And I'm of course, why not? Because I pictured a large group of competent whistlers surrounding me and bolstering me as I went. So they came up, they're you're confirmed to whistle. And I'm oh, sure. So I show up there the next day, and I get to the church, and somebody comes up to me, and he's are you our whistling champion? And I'm am I? And that sounded singular, which is not what I was expecting. And so I sat there and I thought, well, and I keep watching more and more people filing into the church. It's filling up, and I'm just oh my Lord. So I think I've got to whistle something patriotic and short, and then just leave. I think that's my only way. And the guy gave me the most beautiful introduction I've ever heard, except for your introduction earlier. But his introduction was just well, if you want to hear an angel alight, on the branch of a tree, listen to this whistling. She's got a gift from the Lord. And I'm just shrinking lower and lower. And I got up and I slowly whistled. And then they were sort of there's an Emperor's New Clothes moment where they're maybe what we heard was good. Maybe that's actually as good as whistling gets. And they were very nice about it. And afterwards, they're we hear you have a gift. But they did not hear that I had a gift. So yeah, after that, I fled the whistling world, not to return.
It's a very beautiful and sad story about how you fled the whistling world, having reached the immense heights. Thank you so much for whistling. I was trying to figure out a way to ask you to whistle during this, and I have succeeded by framing the question in that way.
Anyone can whistle, except for, you know, I can read Greek, but whistling comes hard. And the song was about
a very good song. Actually, so you're a class assistant. This is filled with references to all sorts of things, classical stuff, but also a lot of fantasy stuff. And you're clearly a big nerd. And I know that you're into Star Wars. And I'd read that you wrote in something I was reading. You talked about wanting to do a Star Wars rom-com.
Oh, someday. That's still a cherished dream. Look, I want to do something with the explosions in the background, like. You know, like everyone is just going about their business and they have dreams that are like Star Wars in-world dreams as opposed to like, I want to save the galaxy and I'm going to use the Force. Like they're just sort of like one of them like works in Jabba's palace as like a dancer or something. I don't know. And she wants to make it to Coruscant one day and be on the big circuit, the Coruscant circuit, you know, that's sort of a dream. And then she maybe gets mixed up with some bounty hunters and like nobody's using the Force and just people have an organic relationship. And then at the end of the movie, maybe someone's like, oh my God, did you hear what happened to, you know, Alderaan? Oh my God, we got to do something. And then you see them maybe like, well, yeah, we got to do something about Alderaan. But mostly it's just about like a very mundane ground level thing. And amazingly, I can't imagine why people aren't raring to spend money on this concept because like just beautiful explosions in the background. But
I think it is a beautiful idea and I fully support this pitch. So for some reason, I felt like you should put it out to the world again. One of the things that amazes me about the book is just the range in which it covers. We talked a lot about the political side. You also cover a lot of stuff about Me Too, which is amazing, like dark, poignant comedy. And really you cover also some of the starkest stuff about child separations and things like that. And on the stuff that's actually about gender in the book, I found this quote that you had given that I thought was incredibly interesting, where you said, the one thing I wish I could go back and tell younger me is that if you're in a room of all guys, it doesn't mean there's something special about you. It means there's something wrong with the room. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, about like the kind of gender stuff that's both in the book and in your own life.
No, totally. I feel like that's one of those things I'm still trying to get around because like like in college I would get into a room and it would be like all dudes and they'd be like, oh, this is so funny. And I would be like, yeah, and look, it's just me, only I. And I think like I wrote this very ill-advised column. I think that was like, you know what, Hillary Clinton's not funny because no woman is funny. And I'm just like, that's a take that is definitely stood the test of time. But I just think one of the difficulties is you start out thinking, well, I can just sort of be a person and move through the world in this way. And then other people keep treating you like you're a woman, not a person. And I feel like, and that's just like, I'm a white woman and I have like, you know, the boons of massive privilege. And even that came as a sort of a, you know, there's always that moment when you get drawn up short and you think this isn't right. I just want to be treated like a person. And so I hope that's like trying to get other people just to have that moment of recognition of like, it's not people are asking for special treatment. They're just asking for default baseline person treatment. And I think, but you can do it in a funny way. Cause like a lot of the stuff that's been said about women as though they're like these marvelous machines with like their wombs wander around their body. They're incapable of reason. You have to come up with this elaborate grammar for them. You have to just, all of the contortions you have to go into in order not to see them as people, like they're absurd and they're excruciating, but they're also, they're not hard to puncture. And like, there's a lot of language like that.
I think that's true. And like that's the thing is that's such a great subject for comedy is actually the struggle to be seen as fully human. Although I will say the one thing is about the womb wandering around the body. I always thought sounded really cool and women should just claim that it's true because it sounds amazing. It's just like the womb is just like floating around, like nosing into places like a puppy. It just sounds really cool to me.
Oh yeah, no, like can you send it out of your body? That's what I want to know. I want to like more, yeah, you can send it, it can go peering places. It's like his dark materials, you know, like
exactly.
You're fully.
That's how it should function. So I think, so I'm gonna, I'm not used to this whole setup. I was gonna, oh wait, is this the time to take questions or should I ask you more questions? I'm sorry. I should be very organized, but it's like so many screens. You'd think so many weeks into this, I would have gotten.
I'm still gesturing with my hands as though that's all the reasonable thing to be doing in these.
I have ended up doing like the I'm Bernadette thing, and so that column that you wrote was for. By the way, is your name Petri or Petri? I realized that, even though we know each other, I realized when he said it, I was about to say it wrong. It's Petri, right? Or
it's Petri. It's like a vegetable that's doing its best.
So you're from a family that has its own politics. Your dad is a congressman. Is that right?
Yeah, and your mom retired.
Sorry. You got what? Say it again.
I said, yes, retired.
Retired. And your mom was in nonprofit. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So how have they reacted to your work? And I think their politics are a little different, right? So.
Well, I think hopefully the thing that we have in common, and one of the things that got me into journalism, just like full stop, is the thing that I always liked the most about what my dad did was that he got to talk to all kinds of people, and he got to just sort of like one of the jobs where people get to come up to you ideally and tell you what they think about the world and what's wrong with it and what they want fixed is when you're their representative. And so like we would get to go to all these parades and people would come up and like a guy who would be like a clown, like in his full clown makeup because he was marching with his troop to like raise money for kids. But he also would like have some very interesting thoughts about what, the branches of government ought to be doing. And so like just getting to have people tell you what they think about the world, I just think that's like the niftiest thing. And so I think I took that from him, and I'm like, I always knew I wanted to be a writer. And so I didn't wind up going into the politics route, but I think it, like that same impulse we share. And so I think he enjoys reading my stuff, even if maybe not 100% of the time are we absolutely marching in lockstep. But who marches in lockstep anyway? That sounds creepy. Don't do it.
It's okay. You and I are both very online people. And I think you've talked about how a lot of your comedy, you bounce things around on Twitter. Is that right?
Yeah, I love this.
How does that fit into your process? I hate the word process. And also I was wondering like who you are online. Do you feel like I'm always sort of curious about people's Twitter personas, particularly like, how is it different from who you are in real life, or is it exactly the same? Like, do you have a sense of the persona that you are there?
I think I do. I think the persona that I am is very enthusiastic about the things that I'm genuinely very enthusiastic about. And so that I feel like tracks very well onto me. Like if you run into me in person, I will be just as excited by The Terror. Everyone should watch The Terror as
I knew it. By the way, I knew The Terror was going to come into this because when we did our last panel, which is a lot about TV, there's a lot about The Terror. Have you guys all seen The Terror? Alexandra would like to recommend The Terror.
I love to recommend it. That's one of my hobbies. But so I feel like I'd be just as enthusiastic about that. But I also have moments when I just want to like be with friends and not be. I'm like, I know there's some people who are like extremely online, like to an even greater degree. And sometimes I'm like, I want to just do a me thing. And I also think because I'm not 100% online and I'm like a good solid 50% online, the times when I'm not like at my cheeriest, most effusive self don't get captured. And so people may be like, oh, she's 100% of the time like that. And like, she never has a day when like getting out of bed is tough. And like, but that's just not who I am on the internet. And I think,
I mean, I always think about like things like Twitter specifically as much more like party environments. Like you could go to a party and burst out crying or screaming. I'm so sorry. There's a very loud alarm thing that just went off here and I gotta, okay, it stopped. I don't know what that was. It was very strange. It might have come through my phone or something. Yeah, there was an emergency thing that came through my phone. So excuse me.
Please go. Like, yeah.
No. I think I guess it was an emergency alert that had to do with people getting off the streets, probably. Sorry, I was just startled for a moment.
No.
I'm a little skittish right now.
Yeah,
but partially because you're younger than me, I'm always interested in people's early online experiences. So you didn't blog and stuff when you were a teenager, and then on Zanga.
I did. I had a homework help website about the Trojan War that I used to run, where I would give advice to other people as though I was not myself like a high school student. So like somebody wrote in and was like, I need your help to write a paper about Achilles quickly. And I'm like, when I was in high school, I did my own work and I got real pride in doing that. Like I sent like the snottiest letter to this poor.
You acted not just like an adult who's an expert on this, but like a very condescending adult who looked down on young people.
I think the first note was from his mother being like, can you please write this paper for my son? And I was like, I found it edifying when I was a youngster. Anyway, whoever I had become in that. So I think it's like the last vestiges of it are still somewhere online, so you can tell what I thought of the movie Troy. I hated it. I walked out of it because Menelaus died, which is not canon. And you can also think like who I thought was the hottest mythological figure. I think I thought it was Paris, but that Achilles was a close second.
I'm trying to think about this. Afterwards, we should ask the audience. Everybody write who you think the hottest mythological figure was in the comments. That should be. Let's see. Nobody's saying. You guys are way too discreet. People, please say who you think the hottest mythological figure is. So you had was this?
No, so I did a lot of that. And yeah, no, I feel like I'm a long time lurker more on like fan sites and whatnot. But I've that's whatever the fan fiction equivalent is of seeing the starships glinting over the Tannhauser Gate. I've probably witnessed whatever that was. Like the New York Times article that came out that was like, hey, did you see the chaos in Wolf Erotica? And I'm like, I knew there was chaos in Wolf Erotica before you told me the New York Times.
Do you think that it's? I mean, I realize you're not like a completely online person. You're not like a walking 4chan or something like that. But like, do you think that does sound very, very bad? I think I was watching Billions last night and somebody had been nicknamed 8chan, which I thought was funny. There were all these like weird internet jokes. Do you think it's an advantage for you in certain ways as a comedy writer that having a lot of online experience? Because people, there was a lot of apocalyptic statements about the effect that online stuff was going to have, and I don't really hold by it. So I'm curious because I think the two are very related.
I think what I like about it is you get to see what the like sort of point A to point B straight line joke that everyone rushes to make first is, and then you have to think like, okay, like, are there other jokes? Is that the joke? Did we just do it? And I think it's also fun because if there were like a meteor coming towards the Earth, people have said this. You get to really realize which word this becomes. You get to realize how unoriginal many of your thoughts are. Like the other day, I was like, I'm like, oh, has anyone ever thought of this joke before? And then I Googled it and there were like 18,000 people stretching back to 2009, all of whom were saying the same joke. And it's nice, you don't feel alone. But you also, I try to see what people are saying. And then also you get, like, if a meteor is coming, you hear all the like, oh man, dinosaurs redux. And then you're like, I think it might be a meteor. I'm not sure, like just, you have to put it back together from the...
I mean, that is one of the quintessential modern experiences, is just reading the 8th iteration of the combination of a meme, a terrible actual real life story, and then some typo somebody made, and then plus a vision.
Like, I think something happened, and I think it probably involved
an elephant and Scapeo, and yeah. It's very strange. Well, anyway, I'm going to turn it. I think it is. I'm going to turn it to. Oh, look! Everybody's writing the hottest. This is great.
Is an obvious call. Yeah.
I'm going to figure out how to work these. So Helen,
Odyssey describes Odysseus as being like very, he's really built.
Stacked. I love the idea of referring to a guy as stacked. Odysseus was built like a brick. Yeah. Let's see, Medusa. I have to say, I agree. I think Medusa, as somebody I relate to strongly. Helen, Achilles, Hermes, Ulysses, Hermes. Was Hermes?
Hermes, no. Good-looking sculptures of him, and good footwork.
Yeah. Princess Leia, Circe. I don't know how to pronounce it. There are words I've never said out loud.
That's always the sign of a good reader.
Yeah, I have had some real problems with this in my life. I wrote about this at one point, but I used to think that the word for a TV show about like a grand, sprawling, epic show about a historical thing was called a miniseries. And I think I said several times, and I was
like
so
a biopic.
A biopic and a miniseries. It's like two of the greatest TV things. Diana the Huntress. A lot of people are Cersei fans. Artemis, Zeus, because lightning is very hot. And Medusa, because the person she's with is always stoned.
Yeah, I think you don't have to take the personality into effect, and like maybe Zeus, but I don't love that personality for you, user.
Yeah. Is this person telling me that it's pronounced Kirky, or is Kirk a different person?
I think it's Cersei, but it could be Kirke. I could be. This is the part where I'm like, it's Greek to me, even though I do technically read Greek. But they didn't have S or C's. They sort of, you have like you can have a sort of a sigma that looks kind of like a C, but it's not Cersei with a sigma. Anyway, so it could be Kirke, in which case it would be Kirke. Yeah.
I need to see this Motley Blue joke that somebody put it in there. Rex, I can say something about Medusa giving men a hard time, but I won't. So I want to open it up to Cersei. Yes. Okay. This is very helpful. I love this group of people. I feel that they are very participatory. They really were game. And I want them to ask questions, and I'm trying to figure out how the questions go through.
Yeah, all the words we've been trying to pronounce. Let's just sort it out now. Like Misold, what is Misold? Is it
yeah, let's sort out this is going to be our group that lets us know how things are pronounced. Let me see if this ask a question thing. Here we go. And this is great because this is a question I was going to ask you and then I didn't get to. So here it is. Are there subjects so weighty or dire that you've thought, no, I can't find a way to do satire with that? I think I remember reading at least one column where you just wrote it straight.
Yeah.
And this is from Darby Lyons.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of subjects like that. And I think I always try to give myself the knowledge that I don't have to try to make jokes out of things that aren't funny. I mean, I think what was happening at the border, and I think what's going on like with police brutality right now, like there's literally nothing funny about that. And that's something that we as a nation have, it's the sickness that has to be, we have to get through it like everyone has to notice that it's a problem and we have to keep working on it. And like there's some things that just you can't joke about. And I think that doesn't mean that like you don't think humor has power or like satire can do great things. It's just, I mean, Oscar Wilde said like life is far too important to think always to talk seriously about it. But I think you can still talk seriously about it sometimes, and that just means that because there's something that I think isn't giving events their due. If you like also like people at funerals may want to make eye contact and need a joke, but that's different from like sometimes if you're just like walking past and you're like, oh, I don't know anyone that happened to, that's funny to me. Like, I think it also depends where you are in a situation and like
the position you are,
like whether you get to joke about something.
Yeah, whether it's your right to make a joke about things, but also it is weird because there's a thing that's like a nihilistic joke about something, and I mean to me some of the most powerful pieces in the book start and proceed as funny, but end on extremely dark and ambiguous notes that aren't actually that funny. But by then you've sort of been tricked into following along with the premise.
Yeah, I think hopefully you can do that where you get somebody like, because jokes can be an argument where you say, well, you think this is true, and therefore you're laughing at it, and then maybe this follows from that, and then you can get them to a place where suddenly they're staggering around, wondering how they wound up where they wound up.
Right. It's like a weapon and a trap that exposes something. It's a debate means. Somebody said, can I ask what the plans are for Inherit the Windbag? I was in EU for the entire run of your earlier play, and I'd hate to miss that too, even though I understand, of course, and I so adore Gore Vidal.
Oh, Gore Vidal is perfect. I spent my entire honeymoon talking about Gore Vidal, as my poor husband can attest. But he's a fun local lad.
Could you explain what Inherit the Windbag is?
So Inherit the Windbag is a play that I wrote about the Buckley-Vidal debates from 1968. And it was, I mean, having steeped myself in that felt like, because they sort of just touched everyone in that era. And it felt like, I kept thinking, well, this probably will be sort of a low level of relevant. And then this year, it still feels like it's all of the things that they were talking about. It was amazing how much they're still with us and how much we either have or haven't moved on them. And so basically the premise is they're sort of revived for one final debate that sort of they bring in everyone from their lives, and it's kind of the frogs-y. I don't know. But we got a tremendous cast, and I love the director, and very excited about it. And then, of course, it became unsafe to gather. And people always talk about like risk-taking theater, but this is the kind of risk you don't want to be taking in theater. So ideally, if the conditions in the city permit, and if we can figure out a way of doing it that is like not risk-taking, but maybe it'll be like streamable. We're trying to figure it out and just proceed with, obviously, the most important thing is that you don't bring people to a place before it's safe to get them there. So hopefully we can do that. And the plan is that it's still in the season this fall, and the set is still up. So we'll see. We'll see what winds up happening. But
it sounds fantastic. I hope that it does go through. Somebody asked, Meg L asked, do you get writer's block, and how do you work through it? I like that the second question presumes that you get writer's block. You get writer's block? You do, don't you?
No. Yeah. It's like the old joke is like, what's the best cure for writer's cramp? Writer's block. But I guess that was back when you had writer's cramp because you wrote physically with your hand. I don't know. I have sort of thumb cramp. Sometimes the one cure for it is you force yourself in great agony to write something, and then you turn it into your editor, and then you think, oh, wait, no, now that I've turned this in, I know actually what the column should have been. Hold that thought. I'll write a whole new one. Sometimes just turning in a really crummy version solves it. And sometimes going for a walk solves it. And sometimes nothing solves it. And you just have to keep thinking and keep reading. I feel like reading is one good solution to having no ideas of your own, is at least you can get something fresh to think about.
What have you been reading lately?
Well, I just finished Rousseau's Confessions, which were a trip and a half. I read War and Peace. like I don't know. I feel sort of weird about it because everyone was like, I'm going to use my time to, and I'm like, well, I have no childcare responsibilities. I guess I can. So it was, that Tolstoy is pretty good. And it needs my approval for sure. He definitely is waiting on that feedback from me saying that it was nifty. Plus I got to listen to Natasha and Pierre and the Great Comet. And it's nice having a musical waiting at the end of a long book.
That is a wonderful thing. This got 2 votes. It says, please update us on the education part of the hard power budget, especially what children are learning from F-35s and MAGA hats. It got 2 votes. So I don't understand what the question means, but
I think that's from the budget. Trump's hard power budget will solve.
Oh, yes. Oh, the hard power. Right. Okay. Yeah. I literally was reading it feeling slightly like I was having a stroke. I was like, it got 2 votes and I sort of understand it, but yes. No, the education part of the hard power budget.
Look, nothing is a better teacher than a fighter jet. That's one of the many capacities the F-35 possesses. And it's also very safe. You just feel incredibly safe. And also, they're probably good PE teachers. I don't know. They're fighter jets. They do it all. What can't they do?
I wanted to actually ask about the cover of this. Was this always, hold on, I got to move this out of the way here. Was this always the cover? Like, did you consider other covers? Did you consider other approaches to this? Because this is an amazing cover. Did they send you a variety? I'm always curious about the publishing process.
Well, my pitch, I was like, why don't we do like a Hieronymus Bosch? And then my husband was like, no, go one better, do a Goya. So I have to give him credit for that. And so we wound up, like, I think the designer said that, like, he said this in like at the last minute as a joke, and we were like, no, absolutely, yes, that one, we love it. It's perfect. And yeah, I feel like it's a wonderful one-piece visual that sort of expresses the theme better than I could. And even the people on Goodreads who are like, I don't know anything about this book except that it makes wonderful toilet paper. Like they also, I think, got the sense of what the book was about just from the cover. So that's
Somebody said, would you talk a bit about your strong interest in Star Wars? And I know we already talked about the Star Wars rom-com, but I believe you also had a Twitter feed devoted to Emo Riley. Could you?
Emo Kylo Ren.
Yes.
No, I always refer to him as he, which who knows, I've anthropomorphized him. But I do feel like I have a sense of like what he would say and what he wouldn't say and like what his preferences are. And he's sort of become a character in his own right. He's been in abeyance a little bit lately just because the movies are over, and he had something to say about how he wore a mask for his grandpa, and then that was, I think, the extent of it. But I don't know, I grew up loving Star Wars because
how old were you when you first saw it?
I was like 7 or 8. It was when the special edition came out. So I think that like there's supposed to be a group of hastily CGI'd musicians in Jabba's palace playing some sort of strange like 2000s era pop song. I just think that's supposed to be there. I think that was meant to be there. But I know that Han didn't shoot first, and I know he didn't say, like, nobody said McClunky to anybody. That's definitely an addition. I just rewatched it actually relatively recently, the trilogy, and I have this like elaborate ritual where I want the room to be very quiet. I don't want there to be anything reflecting on the screen, and I want to really fully go in there because it was like the first thing that had that effect on me of like, you know, when you really fall into a fictional world and you're like, oh my gosh, everything about this is the best. I want to live here. I want a beach towel with Darth Vader on it. And I want to just sleep wrapped up in it. Like that was sort of, it was just pure magic. And so I was always trying to be very respectful to it. And so I just rewatched it, like the McClunky just comes out of nowhere. And it sounds like it was photoshopped in, but audibly. I guess there's a word for that. And it was just wild. So I feel like lately there's just been so much Star Wars that I almost don't know what to do with myself. And so instead of having just like 3 objects that you could sort of approach in a reverent manner and like memorize all the details of, you've now got like a profusion, which is great, but it's also very like, oh my gosh, I'm way behind on like the Rebels, and I haven't seen the end of the Clone Wars animated series yet, and I know that was terrific. And so a lot to catch up on. But
have you ever dressed as Star Wars for a party for Halloween?
All of the time. Jabba the Hutt.
Wait, you always dress as Star Wars for Halloween parties?
I did definitely dress as Jabba the Hutt on at least one occasion, and like I had one of those inflatable Jabba the Hutt suits, and yeah, it was definitely great, and I would highly recommend it. But if you spill beer on it, it will continue to smell like beer, and you're sort of trapped in a hell of your own creation. But
it seems like it would be a hit at a party. Somebody asked, I don't know, this book said, have you read Pat Barker's book, The Silence of the Girls?
I've not. I need to.
Okay. I don't know that book. So I felt, does anyone else have any questions here? Again, I can't see I used to be able to see the people on the side and then they disappeared. And now I'm confused. Sorry, I'm a technically maladroit moderator here. Chat disabled? Oh, okay. Was the chat disabled for you guys? Okay, well, going once, going twice. If anybody wants to ask a question, I think I'm, pushing this question thing at the bottom here. So just because of I'll just ask because of obviously all that's going on. So are you going to be doing all of these virtually, like your book stuff? How is it working?
I think mostly it's happening virtually, and like people, yeah, I think yes, virtually is the answer, and then maybe someday when people are able to gather in one place and fall into one another's arms, we can do like maybe it'll be out on paperback. Who knows?
That sounds really wonderful. Well, I want to thank you so much. Oh wait, some other questions came up. Hold on, let me check them here. Oh, can you speak a little about the Black Lives Matter movement?
I mean, I think it's the civil rights movement of our time, and I think don't listen to me about it, but read. And there's many books if you are like as I am, an awkward white person who's trying to do your best, and there's resources that you can read. There's, I mean, James Baldwin is a great place to start, but Ijoma Oluo wrote a book, so you want to talk about race. there's many others, and I mean, Black Lives Matter. That's it. That's the.
Yeah, it's hard to. I have to say, just straightforwardly, like it was hard for me. I wanted to talk about this during this, and I couldn't figure out exactly how to fold it in, because it's obviously it's the subject and the crisis that surrounds us all this week. So it's complicated. If anybody else wants to say anything and put it up there, I can read it out. But I'll ask somebody asked, what do you think is funny? Not like a person falling down, which is hilarious, but say S.J. Perelman's Joe Keenan soap dish. So now we know what this person thinks is funny. But who are your comedic heroes?
Ooh, I mean, Ali Brosh is a person that I keep coming back to, just because I feel like a lot of the stuff that we have on the internet is due to her and her wonderful cartoons, and like Clean All the Things and all of those memes. And she's definitely one. I also am a Robert Benchley fan. James Thurber said that everything that I do, Robert Benchley did better in a column like 10 years ago. And Fran Lebowitz, when it comes to, I literally had like everyone's been having these sort of strange dreams lately, and I had this whole dream where I like overheard people having Fran Lebowitz was giving a scoop about herself, and I'm like, I've got to go tell all my Fran Lebowitz friends this news. And then I realized in the dream, I didn't have any friends who wanted to hear news about Fran Lebowitz, and then I woke up. And so that's one example. I mean, Mark Twain, Will Rogers, I've been sort of slowly working through him. And Evelyn Waugh, if you like a meme book, he's sort of meme funny. And Stella Gibbons' Cold Comfort Farm.
Oh, yeah.
P.G. Woodhouse. You just want like pure, well-plotted joy. P.G. Woodhouse is great.
Well, I think that's it. Thank you so much, and thanks for having me. I'm sorry for being so awkward about the etiquette of this. I'm sort of like, I have these questions up, and I'm trying to figure out, here you go. Okay, here, because I knew I was going to call you back, but I felt like it was like this mystical thing where I was like, the guy is coordinating it. I need to sort of call him up like some sort of genie, and I couldn't figure out how to do it.
You guys did great. You guys did great.
Thanks so much for having me, and it was wonderful. And thank you to the audience.
Yeah, thank you for being a great audience.
And thanks to both Alexandra and Emily for enabling us to take an entertaining break from all the depressing stuff going around us, and we even got treated to a bit of whistling. Again, the title of Alexandra's book is Nothing is Wrong Here, and Here is Why. And you can get a copy or several by clicking on that green button at the bottom of your screen. And thanks again to everyone for tuning in. From all of us here at Politics and Prose, stay well and well read.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.